Good morning and welcome back to Planner Craft. I'm Natalie and I'm going to be finishing off the Mother's Day card. I was nearly ahead of the game, said Easter then. Mother's Day card today. So, before we go too far, let's open up the chat. And hi to Tracy on YouTube. And hi to Deb on Facebook. So don't be afraid to say hi, and at any point you can pop up a question. Doesn't necessarily have to be related directly to what we're doing at that moment. Hi Carol. Hi Tony. Okay. So far we have cut our pieces. We have 2 stitched panels. We have a stencil that we designed and cut out, hopefully from some mylar or some acetate. We have our digital colouring that we did in Affinity Designer. So if you're not confident with that, you could always hand colour the image in. We have our shadow that we did, so that we can reinforce that design. And we have our text pieces where we've got our background and our detail there. Thank you, Tracy. And following Tracy's suggestion, Mum had already lent me this little heart embossing folder, so I'm going to possibly be using that one too. I've pulled out some inks that should pretty much match my colouring. So I have dried marigold, scattered straw, peacock feathers and tattered rose at the moment. So we'll see how those go. And if you have any questions at any point, don't be afraid to ask. So I'm going to do my gluing bits first. So with the text, if you wanted to make life nice and easy, you could use some double-sided adhesive. Come on, glue. I managed to pick up the one that I obviously haven't used for a while. So Tracy's a member of our DT and she's very kindly modding the feed for me today. Okay. So let's start off with our first M. Going to place that down. There we go. And the next section. There we go. Yeah, I am trying to keep an eye on the chat at the same time. But Tracy probably knows most of the answers. I think I have her trained well. Okay. So the digital colouring I've just printed onto some photo paper, and because it's that little bit thinner, for those of you that might have missed when we cut all these out, I cut an extra piece out of some white card just to give it a bit of reinforcement. So I'm actually using more glue than I normally would, but I just want to make sure that it's well stuck down, especially as I want to 3D this up. Sticking your photo paper down is always fun, especially if you're a bit warm like it is in here today. Computer's going a bit mad, so it's a bit warm. So it does like to stick to you rather than sticking to your card. So do go careful with your fingerprints. Hello Jessica on Twitch. And hi Jill. So there we go. Those are our two main bits for sticking, and now we can concentrate on the other bits while those dry. So first of all I'm going to work on the bigger panel with our stencil. Now this is going to be a bit fun for you to see, so hopefully you can just about see that stencil on there. And I'm going to lay my card down, front down, and then I'm going to position it so I'm actually working on my mat and trying to get this level. So I'm just going to level up my stencil with the grid on my mat, and then I'll level up my card with the next grid along. So as long as you can still see an edge of your design, we should be good to go. Just try and make sure that's absolutely straight. It's worth spending just a little bit extra time just lining it all up. Okay, I'm going to grab a bit of masking tape. Now this is a low tap one and it's wider than your average, so I'm just going to tear it down a little bit, de-tack it. Trousers come in handy for some things. Okay, so just check that alignment, and I'm going to stick it down. So we're sticking it onto the back of our card, so that way we'll get an uninterrupted blend when we're using our stencil. But also if your masking tape does tear your card, it's going to be on the back and out of sight, so don't worry about it. Okay, so I'm going to work onto a blending mat, and that's number one to save me desk. And so it's going to make it a bit easier to get your colour moving. And I'm going to start off with a little bit of the Tattered Rose. So while I'm not certain about the colours, I'm just going to work really lightly until I get the kind of shade that I want. So I've gone for as close as I can get for my colours. I do blend a little colour on a white label onto the side, but you never know. So start lightly and test it somewhere where you know you're going to be able to cover it up. So I know my cup's going to sit roughly at about a third of the way down, so it's a good area for testing your colour. So then if we bring in our cup, we might go, okay, I'm happy with that, or might go, actually, it needs to go a little bit pinker. So let's try something a little more pink. And I'm going to go to spun sugar. So because I was using ink before rather than oxide, I'm going to go for ink again. That way I haven't got to change tool. Thank you, Tony. So this one's going to be, remember you can still have a little bit of that colour in your brush. So, and that's a bit more like it, I think. Yeah. There we go. So I'm trying to work across my stripe so that I'm not having to pull at my stencil too much. If you've gone for a pattern that kind of needs you to get really into that detail and use a little extra masking tape. And I'm sticking to one side, you'll notice. And that's because I'm going to try and do an ombre effect, which is where we blend from one colour to another. The other thing to bear in mind when you're doing anything with a stencil like this is that your colour can appear to be much softer than it actually is. So don't try and go too heavy too quickly. So I've done one side, and hopefully, there you go, if I angle that there you can just see. Okay. So waiting in the wings, I have another ink, which is the dried marigold. And again, we're going to test that more or less the same level. And let's see how that goes. I think I'm going to want to just try and knock back that colour. So I'm just going to tap it out onto my blending mat first. So I'm getting rid of most of that ink. And then just letting my brush take across what it's got left in it. So if ever you have a colour that's just a bit too strong, that's a way around it. Okay, just do this top edge. So at this point there's lots of really fun techniques that you could come in with. So if you wanted to then emboss your stencil so that you have like a reverse letterpress effect, so you would be pushing your inked area up through, you could do. If you want to move it so that your acetate then covers your inked area and then run it through, you could actually pop through the white sections and ink those in another colour. You can flip it so you can have like a crosshatch effect. Well done on finishing the colouring, Carol. Can't wait to see it. Yep, you can do it as a birthday card instead of Mother's Day. That's fine. Speaking of which, not seen my mum. Okay. So therefore if we were to turn it over, we could apply our oxides back across the top so that we get almost like a corset. Which actually I think that looks rather funky. So normally what I would say is make sure you clean your stencil well before you do this next bit. But just for time, this is definitely going to be a blot off first because we don't want it to be too strong. And again, we can test in that same area. So each time you're testing, you can tuck it away. Sounds awfully dry. Let's blot that out a little bit. Yeah. So I quite like the green, but I'm thinking it might work better over this side than over that side. So let's try it this side. There we go. Yep, prefer it from this side. So you'll notice I keep two separate sets of brushes. So one is for my oxides, and that's the coloured ones. And one is for my inks. So we are never contaminating our ink pads. Okay, so for those of you that are new, the challenge of the month is to create me a birthday card. And we select somebody to receive a limited edition set of the 3D Fun Prints pen holder. So you have the universal and the Sharpie and the foil quill adapter. So for those of you that don't know what the foil quill is yet, well, I hate to say that I'm an enabler, but I am so an enabler. So always start off the edge of your blending, even when you're working with a stencil, just in case you manage to get that lovely perfect oval from your brush. Brushes tend to be a lot more forgiving than something like the blending sponges though. So I'm just using what's left on the brush just on that bottom edge. Okay. Which then leaves one more colour, which is our scattered straw. Wrong one, nearly. There we go. Just going to move over a bit and make sure I don't pick up any more of that green. There we go. What I love about the oxides is the opacity of them. So if you do accidentally smudge in the wrong colour, they're usually pretty forgiving. So they're a good place to start for beginners. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow on there, even though it won't really be seen, but so next week I put a post up about working on something a little bit more complicated, and I thought I would go 3D. So what I'll do towards the end of this time is I will show you a little sketch of what I've been working on, and I've started to plan out the net of the project. So you can have a look at that and think whether it might be something you might like to see. There we go. So now we have our little crisscross. Yeah, I think Tracy's very much like me. We just don't sleep. Certainly not last night. Okay, so I'm going to very gently peel this back. But as I said, even if it does start to tear like it has done there a little bit, it's not going to matter. It's on the back. Then with our smaller piece, that's going to be going over the top. So now we have a choice to make. So you'll have seen me do a faux letterpress technique before using embossing folders. So what we can do is we can actually ink up the little hearts so they come through. Ian is absolutely fine, he's a bit bored. Waiting for people, I think. But yeah, he's fine. Probably watching in the background. Okay, I'm going to, let's think, if we've got a cup there, and there's a mum. Trying to think what it's going to look like if we do little pink hearts through that background. And I'm thinking if I go for that sponge sugar, it's going to be really soft. But I might just alternate it to the Distress Oxide, because when we're working with oxides they tend to stamp better and therefore they tend to letterpress better. So I'm just going to open my embossing folder and let's go this way. And let's get my plates ready. So I'm going to use my Gemini. So you have two sides to an embossing folder. One's kind of the tray that it's going to sit into, and then you have the one that's actually going to deboss. So this side, although it's raised, is going to deboss eventually, and that's the side we want to ink. So you want to bear that in mind with which way you're putting your card into your folder. So you want it this way up. No, there's no Ian to come and catch. I have to do this one on my own today. So I will be stood up ready to catch. So I'm just going to ink very lightly down the embossing folder, concentrating on that centre section. If we don't get it perfect, don't worry, it's just going to add to that effect. But the other thing to note is you'll see that I've got it sticking through the little hole at the top. And that's just because it's just a little bit too long for the folder. So I'm just aiming to get those dots more or less in the middle. Okay, there we go. Turn on the Gemini ready. I'm going to very carefully, very carefully. Bring that over. Place my clear plate on top. Sandwiches will vary by machine and embossing folder, so we'll see how this one goes. And I'm going to pop that through. Hi and bye. Oh dear. You don't have to be mad to live here, but it helps. And there we go. There's our letterpress panel. And we can do some ink blending around these edges just to give it a bit of a finishing touch. So the ink doesn't hurt the embossing folder, just make sure you give it a good clean after. So I'm going to go back to my ink rather than the oxide. And just because I'm lazy, I'm going to flick that over and clean it after. So back to my little brush, because that's the one we use with our pink. So when it comes to the brushes that I use with the Distress ink, I just give them a little run over a damp cloth between colours, usually. And by doing this, it's going to pick up on that stitch detail as well. Yes, Ian came to catch it. go a bit more. If you wanted it, say your little hearts were raised rather than going into your card, emboss it first, then you can just rub your ink pad over the top. There we go, so we've got a nice bit of colour that's going all the way around our border. Okay. So now we just got to decide which way round we want those colours to go. I think because we've got so much green down here, it'd be good to put the green down that side so we can flip it round. Yeah, that just works out a bit better. And then we've got a little angle from Mum so that we're mirroring that angle that we've put our sentiment on. So we're aiming for an A5 card, so now you've got to choose whether you want to go for a coloured card blank or if you want to just do a coloured panel. So let's try out a few colours. So here's the kind of pinky colour that I thought was the closest match. So there's that one. We've got a blue that I thought would contrast. Like so. Or we have the same. It's not really lemon, it's not cream, it's a bit of a hard colour to kind of describe. So which do you think? The pink, the blue, or the yellow that isn't yellow? Oh. They do all look nice. It's a very tough decision. It does stand out more on the blue. I think I have to agree with you there, Carol. Just because you haven't got blue in the rest of it, it kind of makes it pop out. There we go. I like how that stripe's come out as well. Oh. Yeah, I think on the blue, let's trim a piece of that up. So I'm going to take it slightly smaller than A5, and then when we come off air, I will mount that up onto an A5 card. So I'm going to go back there. Trim that down. And a little bit off the top and bottom, which helps to just tidy up those corners, especially if your card's been in storage a while. It's a bit feathered on the edges. There we go. That's okay, Sarah Lou. All these online shoppers are so inconsiderate. Coming at 11. Mum usually does the same too. Okay, so let's pop these all together. So I'm thinking with my base layer I'm going to keep that quite flat. So let's go for our glue. Especially means we had that little bit that came a bit loose. There we go. Let's make sure we get it up. Yeah, that way. Let's go for that. Just go for it. There we go. Now, next one. As we've got that texture, we could pop it up a little bit with some 3D foam. Yeah, let's do that. So, flip it over. Going to put a little bit down the centre to start with so that we've got a fair bit of structure underneath. Let's grab a fresh roll. And my little scissors. Now this could be interesting. I had a rejig at the weekend and it's like, they've dropped right down just because they can. There we go. So for those of you that are on the photo editing course tomorrow, we'll be starting at 10 and there will be some uploads going up later on today that you will need to download. I think I'm just going to put a little bit of those sides just so it feels like a little bit more stable just there. Don't forget, if you don't have the hearts, you can always cut your own and use our embossing folder technique that we showed you. That was one of Ian's videos, so if you go back, I think it was last summer we were doing that, you know. Seems like such a long time ago. Do you know what? It's coming up to an entire year that we've been doing this for now. Which is just scary. There's always one bit, isn't there? Poke it down. There we go. But has not time gone fast in some ways? I know it's really slow in others, but when you look back and you think, oh, that was 600 videos ago, and you're thinking, that's just mad. When we started and it was just, here we are for the next 8 weeks or whatever it was we said at the time, and we'll be here morning, afternoon, and occasionally in the evening. And then we just kept going and going. Okay. So, because we're going to be bridging that 3D bit, we want to put our foam pads either side. So what I usually do is try and work so that I've got my border in more or less the right place. I can kind of eyeball it. What's the difference between ink and oxide? Okay, and things making weird noises behind me. The difference is ink is a sort of specialist dye ink. So it's a dye ink, but it blends. So it's almost like suspended in that sense. Whereas your oxides are a hybrid ink, so they're part pigment, part dye, which means they blend really well. But that's also why you wouldn't want to necessarily cross-contaminate them, because they've got that pigment in. And they're called oxide because when you spritz them with water, they go beautifully chalky and the colours lift, in the sense of it lifts a couple of tints. And one of my favourite things with distress ink and oxide is how they react with water differently. So I must admit, with the new colours, I have one of each for the new colours. Okay, so I'm going to go in there, and I think I'm going to have to trim this down a little bit more just to get into that handle. Yeah, just a tad. But the inks don't tend to stamp very well, but the oxides you can stamp with. And then you can have lots of fun with things like your jelly plate, with stamping with oxides. One of the things Ian said about mentioning is if you have one of our books and you like it, please, please, please leave a review. We'd be very, very grateful. And if you have purchased the new book and you've received your copy, if you message me or Plannercraft with the code out of the book, then I will invite you in, because we've had to keep it as a secret group for whatever reason. Facebook isn't letting you get there with a direct link either. So I'm going to go for there and get that as centre as possible. This is always interesting. We try not to get my head in the shot too. Yeah, I'm going to go there. Yeah, I did do an ink video going right back, and I think it's on my wall because it's that far back. And I did the different black inks and how they react with water and alcohol. And that was when I did the big switch over to the squid ink, because it could just stand up to both rather than me having to use one or the other ink pads. Okay, so with Mum, just need a little bit on these bits of the M. So if you've got pads, this bit's a bit easier, but I really need to sort out my scissors. They're a bit sticky. But I won't be crafting much this weekend, so I can always do those and let them dry thoroughly. But it's amazing to think how the group has grown over the past year as well. because when I started doing the daily streams, I hadn't streamed for something like 2 years. So it was a case of relearning everything, doing it differently, because the very first one we did just on Twitch. And I spent more or less an entire Saturday on Twitch, doing bits with the scan and cut, and then turn it into a nice project. And it's one of the ones that we used to use for the start video last year. And then a couple of days later it went, and it's like, oh, that's a shame, because that was a really nice project. So then we went, okay, well, go to Facebook then, try it that way. Because at that point, let me think, at that point Pete was going to Facebook doing his giveaways, and Lou was going at 12 o'clock, and Barbara hadn't started yet. Yep, sticky stuff remover is great. I also do alcohol as well. Oh, that's nice, Deb. No, it's an expensive piece of equipment to just leave there not doing anything, and the number of people that don't take it out of the box is so sad. So sad. We had someone who had bought it for 2 years before they came to a class, and they just left it in the box. Hadn't even got it out to check it. And there we go. You know, and unfortunately that's been kind of the norm when we've done classes. There's always been somebody that has had it for ages and been too afraid to get it out. So I promised a little preview for next week, didn't I? So let's get my little roll of paper. So this is how a lot of my bigger projects start. It's a roll of paper, because you can go and go and go and go, and you don't have to worry about getting to the end. So starting up here, we have a little armoire, and it is only little, it's only 3 by 3. So I thought, keep it nice and simple and start it little. So it's literally about that big, and you're going to have 3 full drawers that are going to go that entire 3 by 3, and then you're going to have 4 little half ones. So if that's kind of your limit, you can stop there. Then I thought, oh, it'd be quite nice to do a little gatefold triptych mirror to go on top, like a little dressing table. So I've put that there. So that works the same way as an easel card. So if you've done an easel card before. And then I thought, well, we can get even more complicated and do a little bit of engineering. And we can actually have it so that if we open the drawer this side, the drawer that side is going to open at the same time. So how complicated would you like it to be? Would you like it to be just that bottom bit? Would you like it with the mirror? Or would you like it with the mechanics as well? Okay, so I'm going to be doing it in Affinity Designer, because I know quite a few of you have bought that. But if you want to join in with Skull, you can. That's absolutely fine. And I'm sure Tracy will be translating shortcuts for me. Yep, that's fine, Linda. If you want to do it in Illustrator, you can. If you want to do it in CorelDRAW or Inkscape, you can do it in those too. The only one that you may not be able to do all of it in is Canvas, just because of the accuracy of getting things like this bit. So we've got where we've literally got to do things like a single line cut up here. So although I've drawn like a gap in there, it's actually got to go right up to there. Yep, if it takes you longer, that's why I'm like I'm saying it's going to be a whole week. So it's literally going to be step by step. So to start off with, we're just going to focus on building this bit. This is the really complicated bit. Okay. Then we'll do the drawers. Then we'll do the mirror, and last of all, we'll do the mechanics if you want to. So we'll see how far we get with this bit, and then drawers, mirror, and so long as we have time next week, we'll do the mechanics, because they're fairly simple. And then you can do all your decorative panels to go on it, and we'd love to see them in the group. Yep, I will literally be telling you exactly how and why we're doing each section. So I'm literally going to be spending Sunday going da 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 and making sure that I am right in my own mind. I'm sure it's right, but I've been through it a few times. Yeah, so literally it's going to be a case of there's going to be lots of shape drawing, so it's not all going to be paths and nodes, you'll be pleased to hear. So you can do it with shapes and then we can weld them, but as long as your snap is on, so that you know that everything is snapped together properly, so that we've got. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about dash lines. So you can see here I've got lots of valley folds, and then suddenly I go to mountains, then back to valleys, and it literally carries on through like that. So valleys, then mountains, then valleys. So we can use two different types of dash line to actually distinguish, so that when we come to put it together, it makes a little bit more sense for us. What I would say is have a piece of card when we do come to cut it out that is a practice one, that you don't mind actually drawing your dash lines on, so that you can go, right, okay, that bit folds there, that bit folds there, that bit folds there, and you don't stick it, you just literally just fold it all together, and then you can see that it's all correct. And then when you unfold it back out, you've already kind of got where you're scoring for your next one, if that makes sense. So I thought it was about time we did something a bit special, and I thought, you know, first year, about time we started tackling something that was a little bit more daring. So if you're not at this level yet, you've got the weekend. There's only 600 videos. And I am joking. So if you're not confident yet, don't worry. Just watch along. Then keep going with us after, and then eventually you'll be able to come back and have a go. So some of the ladies in the group have been with us for a year, some even longer. So they're all at different levels. So don't think that you're daft if you have a question, or, you know, there's no such thing as stupid questions in this group. And we always try and help. It will possibly be A3. Just looking at how it's kind of spanning out here, it could be A3. I will try and not let it be a 12 by 24. So does anybody not have a 12 by 24 mat? because if not, you can always tile it if you have the vinyl blade. If you don't have the vinyl blade, we can always suggest other ways. You can learn a lot just by watching. Just getting your head around back folds and how they work is a good place to start, you know. When you're looking at something, you're thinking, okay, well, how can I actually do that? Is there a way of being able to do that in one piece rather than having to build it cylinder by cylinder by cylinder? Because then you just waste a load of card in those middle bits. So if we can try and do it this way, where it's kind of going like that. Okay, Deb. I'll see if I can do it and do a 12x12 version 2 then. Maybe a little bit tinier. Just a little bit. If you're feeling brave, you can do it all by hand, Carol, but you're braver than I am. I'm quite happy to mock it out like this, but trying to then do it so that all the lines follow through. Yeah. So as long as all your score lines line up, and it's going to be one of those cases where I'm going to show you how to use guides to your advantage as well. Okay, so that's next week kind of taken care of. And as I said, if you're in the photography course tomorrow, there's going to be a download. Thea, right, on the 700, I have the CM sitting behind me. If you don't have the option of the vinyl blade in terms of actually using the blade, then I can probably work out the tiling for you so you can do that manually. Or you could just buy the blade and put it up until you get a DX and still use the tiling function, because it still works with the CM. To answer your question, Linda, so you have the 12x24 mat, so yep, go for that. You don't need the vinyl blade if you've got a 12x24 mat. It was mainly for the tiling, I was thinking. Standard or deep cut, that depends on the card that you are using. So if you want to cut it out of some thicker card without going too thick, I would say probably about 400 is the maximum for this starter project. By the time you start getting up to 480, it gets a bit difficult to get it to fold accurately. So 400 max. So try and stick to your standard blade. Usually by the time you get into 480, you're looking at something that's quite board-like. The vinyl blade doesn't work on both, but the tiling function does. So you don't have to have that vinyl blade in to use the tiling function, which is very useful. So if you want to do things like your 12x12 backgrounds for scrapbooking, then tiling function comes in really handy with that, because you can actually cut it in a couple of pieces and actually make it fit your 12x12 exactly. Carol, my max would be 350. Yes, that would be plenty. That would be plenty. Oh, just get rid of the notifications. I forgot to put it on to do not disturb again. Oh dear. Yep, that'll be fine, Linda. So, hopefully you've enjoyed this week and kind of breaking that project right down into little sections. And I look forward to seeing what you've made. So, I won't be around much tomorrow, but if there's anything in particular, we'll try and catch up in the breaks. Sunday we'll probably be trying to have a day off. But we know how well that goes. I try every week. I fail miserably. That's okay, Tracy. So you've learnt some really different skills this week. So I think you should all give yourselves a good pat on the back if you joined in and had a go. And don't be afraid to show what you've done. Of course you can, Carol. I'm always available for DM. Except if it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, then I'm not. Yes, definitely need thinking head on. So what I'm thinking is computer work, day 1 and day 2. So that we really focus on getting that initial setup right. Then day 3 we'll do our cutting of our pieces. And day 4 we'll do assembly. And day 5 we'll do decoration, because obviously once you've actually got your structure built, you're going to want to make it look pretty, and you might want to do some flowers to embellish it. You might want to put a little sentiment on it. So start thinking about what you want to pop on your little mirror as well. So the mirror is actually going to fold in like a little gatefold, so you've got those 2 top panels to do something with. And then you can have mirror card on the inside, or if you want to, when it opens up, you can put a verse in that centre panel and 2 pretty panels down either side. So I look forward to seeing you next week. If you can sketch it out, then start to sketch out your ideas about how you might want to decorate it, and if it's anything really complicated, let me know just so I can plan that in. Okay. So I'll say bye-bye for now, and everybody in the photo course, I'll see you tomorrow at 10, and everybody else, I'll see you 11 o'clock on Monday. Bye!